Hi and welcome everybody to the Uncanny X-Men. My name is Philip Tanzer and today I want to talk about Dr. Eric Anderson. Dr. Eric Anderson was one of the speakers at the International Conference for Men's Issues that I attended a couple of weeks ago. Eric Anderson is a scholar and an expert on masculinity. And when he gave his speech, and you can find his speech here on YouTube, a lot of things, I did agree with some things he said, but some things he said definitely irritated me. And then later on, I had the chance to talk to him in person, and I was irritated even more. The Honey Badgers, that's a radio station from America that talks about men's issues. They did a great show about Dr. Anderson and what he had to say at the conference. But I want to talk about certain things that they didn't mention or that they couldn't mention. So before we really get into things, I have to say a couple of things about myself. So, from the age of, I would say, 17 till I was 32, I was identified as gay. So I only had relationships and sexual contact with men. That is quite important because Dr. Eric Anderson is gay as well. And it's part of the problems that I had with what he had to say. But since I was 32, I dropped the label gay and I started dating girls again, and I'm currently in a relationship with a wonderful woman, and I still have contact to men, so I'm attracted to both genders now, and that's absolutely fine for me. So, because I have these two experiences, I know what it's like to live a gay life and to live a straight life, or predominantly straight life, and I know how different these 2 points of views can be. In the talk that Dr. Eric Anderson gave, the talk was called Masculinity from a Non-Feminist Point of View. And I would say that if his talk wasn't from a feminist point of view, it was from a gay point of view, which isn't a problem. But if you are the main expert on masculinity, that might be a problem if you only know one side of being a man, if you only have gay experiences. So, I first heard of Dr. Anderson because he was a speaker at the conference, and before I went to the conference I looked at some of his videos on YouTube, and I didn't know that he was gay at this point. I watched a video about monogamy, and that monogamy maybe isn't the way forward for relationships, and because I'm in favor of open relationships or partially open relationships, I could identify with what he said. But I already noticed that he had very strong views without taking the other side into consideration, which was something that I noticed more and more later on when I talked to him. So when Dr. Anderson had his speech, he promoted that men's rights activists and open-minded feminists should work together, and I was all on board with that because I think that you should be able to look at the other side and work together. So I applauded that, but there were a lot of things in his speech that were weird. He was talking a lot about, and again, please watch his whole lecture. It's quite interesting. Every time he was talking about masculinity, he was talking about masculinity from gay perspective. So I noticed a strong gay agenda, or at least he looked at masculinity through a gay lens. And that's absolutely okay, but it's not very objective. Very often when he talked about masculinity, he said, well, the more masculine people identify, the more homophobic they are. And in the last couple of years, men stopped identifying as very masculine, and they're less homophobic. And that's a good thing. So everything he said about masculinity was always connected to how homophobic are men, or how gay do people become, or how potentially bisexual do they become. And that's, again, that's absolutely fine if you are a specialist, if you are an expert on masculinity from a gay point of view, or gay masculinity. And I think if there was a committee of experts on masculinity, then he would be a very, very valuable asset, because he has a unique point of view, a gay point of view. But how can somebody who has never had, as far as I know, who has never had experiences being in a proper long-term relationship with a woman, be an expert on masculinity when 95% of men have relationships with women? It's an aspect that he can't understand. And because I know both sides, because I've been in relationships with men and with women, I can tell you it's a huge difference. You can't compare it. Being in a relationship with a woman is completely different from being in a relationship with a man, at least from my point of view. And when I was gay, I was not able to completely understand the problems that men face with their wives, with their children, with their version of masculinity. I had my own struggles with masculinity, but it was, I would say, gay struggles with masculinity. So, after the talk that Dr. Anderson gave, I wanted to speak to him, and I had the chance to sit down at a table with him for 15-20 minutes, and we were not alone on the table, so there were another, I would say, 4 or 5 people sitting there. So everything that I'm talking about now, that wasn't being said in private, so I don't have a problem with sharing these informations. My impression of Dr. Anderson, and I have to say that because I might be slightly biased, but I had a very negative impression of Dr. Anderson. I found him to be very self-righteous and quite smug, and I had the feeling that he was not able to question his own position, especially when it came to homosexuality. When we were sitting at the table, I actually asked him, can you be gay and be the leading expert on masculinity? And he said, well, you don't have to be, I think he said, a germ. You don't have to be a germ to be an expert on germs. And I think that's a stupid comparison. I think you can be an expert on other subjects that you are not being part of. But to really understand the subject, it does help if you have personal experiences. And as I mentioned before, I think the fact that he has never lived a straight lifestyle makes it impossible for him to truly understand what straight men face. He can only understand masculinity through his personal lens. Yes, if he talks to people in interviews, of course he can get a deeper understanding. But from what I heard, from what I know about him, his main focus is always masculinity and homosexuality. So to me it feels like he doesn't really try to understand what masculinity is like for a straight man. So my problem with Dr. Anderson was that to me it seemed he's actually not interested in the well-being of man as a gender, that he's more concerned with man being a potential threat or potential allies to the LGBT community. And that is a problem, because you shouldn't focus on the topic of masculinity with an agenda unless you actually say, this is my focus. I'm not an expert on masculinity. I am an expert on masculinity through a gay lens or from a gay point of view, or when it comes to homophobia. Another big problem that I had with Dr. Anderson was when we talked about gay adoption and gay parenting. I have to say I'm all in favor of gay marriage and that gay couples should have the same rights as straight couples when it comes to taxes and things like that. I do have slight problems with gay adoption. I'm not against gay adoption, but I think the benefit of the children is always the most important thing. And I have always said that if two men or two women adopt a child, then they have to make sure that there is enough influence from the missing gender in their childhood. So, for example, a very close connection to if it's two guys, a very close connection to the biological mother or grandmother, or you get what I'm trying to say. When I talked about that with Dr. Anderson, he has two children, two sons. He said very clearly that it doesn't matter if a child grows up with two fathers or two mothers or a mother and a father. The gender of the parents doesn't make any difference. The only thing that is important that a child grows up with two parents and that they make enough money. That is the only thing that matters. And the way he said it, he stated it like a fact. And I asked what proof he had. And he said, oh, there is plenty of proof that children growing up with gay parents are not doing worse than children growing up with straight parents. And I believe that to be absolutely true. I'm not questioning what he said. But that does not mean that there is nothing missing in their life. And I don't think that this social experiment of LGBTQ parents has been going on for long enough to really say that it doesn't have an impact on the children. Of course it does have an impact how you grow up. I'm not saying it has a bad or a positive impact, but it will have some kind of impact. And the fact that Dr. Anderson completely denied the possibility of it having an impact shows me that he is incapable of questioning his own lifestyle. He could never say, oh, maybe same-sex couples raising children, maybe there might be problems. We don't know yet. He's not able to say that. He can only say, no, there are no problems. Because obviously, if he would say there might be problems, he's questioning his own lifestyle. And from my conversations with him, it was very obvious that he can't do that. Another big issue that I had was when he was talking about his children, and somebody apparently asked him if gay parents can be as good as straight parents, or somebody said that they don't believe that gay parents can be as good as straight parents, and he said and I really try not to misquote him here, and I do apologize if I get something slightly wrong, but he jokingly said that he is actually better suited to be a parent, or that him and his partner are better suited to being parents than a straight couple, because they handpicked their children. They put a lot of effort into picking their children. And he told me how they got their children. And apparently, and that's what he said, the mothers that they chose as surrogate mothers came from families with an Olympic sport background. Dr. Anderson himself, he was a sport coach, and he is quite focused on sport. So he handpicked the mothers so that the children would have good sport DNA. And they handpicked the sperm and made sure that it would be male babies. And Dr. Anderson said that he chose 2 male babies because he thinks he's better suited to raise boys than girls. And you can say that's absolutely fine, there is no problem with that, but something about that felt very odd to me, and I felt very uncomfortable about this. I have to be honest, when I have children, I would love to have a boy. I would love to have a boy, 1 girl. I would be sad if I didn't have a boy. But I would never interfere into what gender my children have. And you could go as far as saying it's quite sexist to pre-choose the gender of your child. These conversations, when I had these conversations with Dr. Anderson, I felt slightly uneasy about him. And then when I slept about the conversations for one night, the next morning I woke up and I was incredibly stressed out, and I had such a negative feeling about Dr. Anderson and his agenda. And it's very sad, because I was really hoping that him being at the conference and as a gay man bringing his expertise to the men's rights movement would be a really positive thing. But unfortunately, I felt that the opposite was the case. I'm not blaming Dr. Anderson, because he has his personal point of view. He had his personal experiences, and it's very difficult to step out of your role and to try to become more objective. And maybe he truly does try to be more objective. And if he wants to help the men's rights movement in the future, and if he can move away from his very strong views, his very strong agenda, I'm more than happy to, it would be great to have him as an expert in the movement if he becomes more objective. But the experience that I had at the conference, I thought was quite a negative one, and I think people should be aware that he is not an expert on masculinity itself, but that he is only an expert, if that, an expert on masculinity through a gay point of view. I'm very sorry that this video had to be slightly negative, and usually I really try not to attack people, and I hope it's not my intention to attack Dr. Anderson, and I applaud him for coming to the conference and to speaking there. But I thought it was important to point that out. And the Honey Badgers, when they did their video about Dr. Anderson, they were not able to say certain things because both of them who talked about Dr. Anderson were not gay, and so they were lacking this point of view that I think I have. Okay, thank you very much for watching me. Please leave your comments below, and if you have any questions, if there are any topics that you want me to discuss, please write it in the comments below, and I will try to address everything in the next video. Thank you very much, and see you. Bye.